My name is Emily Carter. I'm 34 years old. And last Saturday, at my sister's housewarming party, she stood in the center of her brand new living room, raised a glass of champagne, and told everyone I was jealous of her life. What she forgot was that the mortgage on that house was in my name. The party was loud, bright, and crowded. Music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen, while people walked around admiring the place like it was something out of a real estate magazine. And to be fair, the house was beautiful. It had tall windows that let the evening sunlight spill across the hardwood floors. The kitchen had white marble counters and one of those oversized islands that people always gather around at parties. The backyard had a brand new wooden deck that overlooked a small patch of trees. Everyone kept saying the same thing. "Wow, Lily, this place is amazing. You two did so well. Homeowners before 32. That's impressive." My sister, Lily, soaked up every word like it was oxygen. She walked people through the house like a tour guide, one hand on her champagne glass, the other waving dramatically toward each room. "This is the guest bedroom. This will eventually be the nursery. And this," she said proudly, tapping the marble counter, "is imported stone." People laughed and complimented her. Her husband, Mark, stood beside her with his arm around her waist, smiling like he had personally built the house with his bare hands. I stayed near the back of the room, not hiding, just observing. Because while everyone else saw Lily's dream home, I saw something very different. I saw the loan documents I had signed 3 months earlier. I saw the bank officer sliding the contract across the desk toward me, and I saw my own signature on a 30-year mortgage. But no one at this party knew that, because Lily had begged me not to tell anyone. "Please," she had said. "It would be embarrassing if people knew we needed help." So I stayed quiet until she opened her mouth. The moment came about an hour into the party. People had gathered in the living room while Mark opened another bottle of champagne. My mother was sitting on the couch, proudly telling Lily's friends how hard her daughter had worked to build a beautiful life. Then Lily suddenly tapped her glass with a spoon. Clink, clink. The room slowly quieted. "Okay, everyone," she said with a big smile. "I just want to say thank you for coming tonight." People cheered lightly. She wrapped an arm around Mark. "This house means everything to us," she continued. "It's proof that if you work hard enough, you can build the life you want." More nods, more smiles, and then her eyes drifted across the room until they landed on me. Her smile shifted, just slightly. You know, the kind that looks friendly from far away but carries something sharp underneath. "And," Lily added casually, "it also proves something else." The room waited. "That sometimes," she said, lifting her glass again, "people close to you don't actually want to see you succeed." A few confused glances moved through the crowd. Then Lily laughed lightly. "You know how it is," she said. "Some people get jealous." Her eyes were still on me. Now other people started looking too. My mom chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, Lily!" But Lily wasn't finished. "My sister Emily," she continued, gesturing toward me with the champagne glass, "has always been a little competitive with me." The room turned fully. 30 pairs of eyes, all suddenly on me. "She didn't think we could pull this off," Lily said, shaking her head dramatically. "But here we are." A couple of Lily's friends laughed politely. Someone muttered, "Siblings, right?" I felt the familiar heat of humiliation creeping up my neck, but I didn't react. I didn't argue. I didn't interrupt. I simply sat there, because Lily didn't understand something very important. This house, the one she was proudly celebrating, the one she was using to embarrass me in front of everyone, only existed for one reason. 3 months earlier, the bank had rejected her mortgage application. Then they rejected Mark's. And the only way they finally approved the loan was when my credit score and my name went on the paperwork. But Lily wasn't finished with her speech yet. She lifted her glass one more time. "So here's to hard work," she said proudly. "And to proving certain people wrong." The room raised their glasses. Everyone except me. Because as I watched my sister celebrate the house she believed was hers, I realized something. Lily hadn't just insulted me. She had just made the worst mistake of her life. And she did it in a room full of witnesses. I slowly picked up my wine glass, took a small sip, and waited. Because if there's one thing working in finance teaches you, it's that the truth always shows up eventually. And when it does, contracts matter. Very, very much. If you had asked anyone in my family growing up, they would have told you Lily and I were very different. That was the polite way of saying one of us was expected to be responsible, and the other one never had to be. Lily is 3 years younger than me. From the moment we were kids, she had a way of walking into a room and becoming the center of attention. She was funny, charming, and confident in a way people found irresistible. Teachers loved her, friends adored her, and my mother treated her like she could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was the dependable one, the quiet one, the one who studied, planned, and made sure things didn't fall apart. When Lily forgot assignments in high school, I helped her finish them. When she overspent in college, I helped her organize a budget. And when she called crying after making another financial mistake, I was the one who picked up the phone. By the time we were adults, the pattern was already set. Lily chased whatever made her happy in the moment. I cleaned up the mess afterward. That's how I ended up sitting across from her in a coffee shop 3 months before the housewarming party. She looked stressed that day. Not her usual dramatic kind of stressed either. This was real. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and she kept tapping her fingers against the table like she couldn't sit still. "Emily," she said, lowering her voice, "I need your help." Whenever someone in my family said those words, I already knew what was coming. "What happened?" I asked. She slid her phone across the table. It was an email from the bank. "Mortgage application declined." I looked back up at her. "They said our credit profile is too risky," she said quickly. "But it's not fair. Mark just had a couple late payments during COVID." I didn't say anything, because I knew that wasn't the whole story. Lily and Mark had been living well beyond their means for years. Expensive vacations, designer furniture, constant online shopping, and most of it had been paid for with credit cards. "How much debt?" I asked calmly. She hesitated. "Lily, about 40,000? I leaned back in my chair. "That's why they rejected you." She nodded miserably. "But we already found the house," she said quickly. "Emily, it's perfect. It's exactly what we've been looking for." I rubbed my temples. Buying a house isn't like buying a car or taking a vacation. It's a massive financial commitment. And Lily had just been turned down by the people whose job was literally to evaluate financial risk. "Maybe this isn't the right time," I suggested. Her eyes widened instantly. No, we can't lose this house." She leaned forward across the table. "There has to be another way." And then she said the words that would come back to haunt both of us. "You have amazing credit." I stared at her. "No, Emily, just listen." "No, please," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "If you co-sign, the bank will approve it." I shook my head again. "Co-signing a mortgage means I'm responsible for it if you can't pay." "But we can pay," she insisted quickly. "We just need the approval." I had worked in finance long enough to know that sentence was one of the biggest red flags in existence. Still, Lily kept pushing. "Emily, this is our chance to finally build something real. And if something goes wrong?" I asked. "It won't." People who say that have usually never dealt with consequences before. But Lily wasn't done. She made one more move. The move she knew would work. She called our mother. Within 20 minutes, my phone rang. "Emily?" My mom said immediately. "Your sister says you won't help them." I sighed. "Mom, this is a huge financial risk." "Family helps family," she replied sharply. "They have debt. They're trying to start their life." The pressure kept building. My mother, Lily. Even Mark eventually called to explain how this house was the opportunity of a lifetime. By the end of that week, I was exhausted. And against my better judgment, I agreed. But only under one condition. We met at the bank to discuss the loan structure. The officer looked over the documents and then said something that surprised Lily. Given their credit profile, the safest option is to have Emily as the primary borrower. Lily blinked. What does that mean? It means the mortgage would be under Emily's name, he explained. The room went quiet. Mark looked uncomfortable, but Lily recovered quickly. That's fine, she said. We'll still make the payments. I turned toward her. If I do this, I said firmly, you handle every single payment. On time. Of course. And if anything goes wrong, we talk immediately. Absolutely. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're saving us. The paperwork was signed 2 weeks later. My name, my credit, my responsibility. And before we left the bank, Lily pulled me aside. One more thing, she said quietly. What? Can we not tell people the mortgage is in your name? I frowned. Why? She shrugged. It just sounds better if people think we did it ourselves. I should have said no. Instead, I sighed and nodded. Fine. And that decision is exactly why, 3 months later, I was sitting quietly at her housewarming party, listening to my sister tell a room full of people that I was jealous of her success. What Lily didn't realize was something very simple. When you sign a mortgage, you also sign power, and my sister had just pushed me far enough to consider using it. By the time Lily finished her little speech, the room had already started to fill with that uncomfortable kind of laughter people use when they're not quite sure what's happening. A few of her friends chuckled politely. Someone raised their glass and said, "To sibling rivalry." My mother laughed louder than anyone else. "Oh, Emily knows Lily doesn't mean anything by it," she said, waving her hand dismissively. 30 people were standing in that living room, and somehow the entire moment had turned into a joke at my expense. I could feel the attention still lingering on me, waiting, watching to see how I would react, but I didn't give them anything. I simply took another small sip of wine and kept my expression calm. Years of working in finance had taught me something important. When emotions get loud, the smartest move is usually to stay quiet and let people keep talking, because the more someone talks, the more likely they are to reveal something they shouldn't. And Lily loved talking. The music slowly came back on. Conversations restarted, and people began moving around the house again. But the tone of the party had shifted. Now there were occasional glances in my direction. Curious ones, a few sympathetic ones, and some clearly entertained ones. Lily, meanwhile, had moved into full hostess mode. She guided a group of her friends toward the kitchen. "Come see this," she said excitedly. This was the feature that sold me on the house. They gathered around the marble island. "Imported quartz," she said proudly, running her hand across the surface. "The realtor said most houses in this neighborhood don't even have something like this." Her friend Danielle whistled. "This must have cost a fortune." Lily laughed. "Well, you know, when you work hard, things start to pay off." Another friend looked around the open concept kitchen. "This place is huge," he said. "How big is the mortgage?" I saw Lily hesitate for half a second. Then she shrugged casually. "It's manageable." Mark stepped in beside her, clearly enjoying the attention. "We got a great rate before interest went up again," he added. "Seriously?" Danielle said. "That's impressive. My bank told me approvals are getting stricter." "They are," Mark replied confidently, "but we have really strong financials." I almost choked on my wine. Strong financials. That was one way to describe a couple whose credit score had been rejected twice. But Lily just smiled and nodded like everything he said was completely true. Across the room, my mother was telling another group of guests the same story she had been repeating all night. "Lily has always been very determined," she said proudly. "When she sets her mind to something, she makes it happen." The irony was almost impressive. Meanwhile, Lily spotted me standing near the dining table and apparently decided she wasn't finished yet. "Emily," she called out suddenly. The entire kitchen turned to look at me again. She waved me over dramatically. "Come here for a second." I walked toward the group slowly. "What's up?" I asked. Lily smiled brightly. "We were just talking about how hard it is to get a mortgage right now," she said. Emily works with numbers all day. Maybe she can explain the boring financial side. A couple of people laughed. Yeah, someone said. Give us the serious version. Lily tilted her head playfully. Although honestly, she added, Emily tends to overthink everything. More laughter. She was actually pretty skeptical when we first told her we were buying this place. Lily continued. That wasn't true, but it was a good story. She kept warning us about risk and interest rates and blah, blah, blah. Lily said, rolling her eyes jokingly. Danielle grinned. Classic older sister energy. Exactly, Lily said. But sometimes you just have to take chances in life. She wrapped her arm around Mark again. Right? Mark nodded. If we had listened to everyone who told us it was too risky, we wouldn't be standing here right now. A few people clapped lightly, and suddenly I understood something. Lily wasn't just teasing me. She had turned me into the character in her success story. The cautious sister, the doubter, the one who didn't believe in them, which made their victory look even better. I glanced around the kitchen. Everyone was smiling, listening, admiring the story, and Lily believed every word she was saying. That was the fascinating part. Somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that this house was proof of her determination and hard work, not the result of someone else signing a legally binding loan agreement. Then Danielle asked a question that changed everything. So how did you guys even get approved? She asked. Our lender basically laughed at us. Lily didn't hesitate. She lifted her glass again and said confidently, good credit, and a lot of discipline. That was the moment I felt something inside me finally snap. Not anger, not embarrassment, just clarity. Because Lily wasn't just lying. She was rewriting reality in a room full of people. And in doing that, she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I placed my wine glass gently on the counter, looked at my sister, and realized something very simple. Lily thought this house proved she had won. What she didn't understand yet was that the contract said otherwise, and contracts always win in the end. For a moment after Lily said it, good credit and a lot of discipline, the group in the kitchen nodded approvingly. Danielle looked impressed. Honestly, that's rare these days, she said. Most people our age are drowning in debt. Mark laughed lightly. Yeah, well, we're pretty careful with money. I watched him say that while holding a glass of champagne that probably cost more than one of their monthly credit card payments. Still, I stayed quiet, not because I didn't have something to say, but because I was curious how far Lily was willing to take this performance. The answer, it turned out, was very far. My mother had wandered over by then, carrying a small plate of appetizers. What are we talking about? She asked. Mortgages, Danielle said. Oh, my mom said proudly. Lily handled that beautifully. Lily smiled. Mark nodded along, and then my mother added the sentence that pushed everything a little further. Unlike Emily, she said with a chuckle, she worries too much about money. A few people laughed again. Emily has always been overly cautious, she continued. Numbers, spreadsheets, worst-case scenarios. She waved her hand dismissively. But Lily understands that sometimes you have to take risks. There it was again. The story, the version of reality where Lily was the brave dreamer and I was the doubter standing on the sidelines. Danielle looked between us. Well, she said, smiling awkwardly, I guess it worked out. Lily lifted her glass slightly. Exactly. Then she glanced at me again. And for some reason she couldn't resist pushing one more time. You should relax a little, Emily, she said. Life isn't a balance sheet. More laughter, someone nearby said. She's got a point. I nodded slowly. Maybe. Lily grinned like she had just scored a small victory. Then another guest, a guy named Aaron who worked in real estate, asked the question that shifted the entire energy of the room. So who is your lender? He asked. Mark answered quickly. North Valley Bank? Aaron raised an eyebrow. They're strict. They liked our profile, Mark said confidently. Aaron looked genuinely curious. What credit score did you need? Lily shrugged casually. High 700s. I almost smiled. Because the real number sitting on the loan application was mine. Aaron nodded slowly, impressed. That's solid. And you didn't need a cosigner? Lily answered instantly. Nope. I felt the room get very quiet for a moment. Not silent. Just that subtle pause when people are listening closely. And Lily kept going. We've always been careful financially, she said. We just planned ahead. Planned ahead. That was a fascinating phrase considering 3 months earlier she had been crying in a coffee shop because every bank in the city had rejected her application. I glanced toward Mark. For the first time all evening, he looked slightly uncomfortable, like he knew this conversation was drifting into dangerous territory. But Lily didn't notice. Or maybe she just didn't care. She was enjoying the attention too much. Aaron leaned against the counter. Well, he said, getting approved right now is impressive. Most couples are struggling unless their finances are perfect. Lily shrugged again. Discipline, she repeated. Then she pointed lightly toward me. You should hear Emily sometimes, she said jokingly. She practically gave us a lecture about why buying a house was too risky. Another round of laughter. But we proved her wrong, Lily said proudly. That was the moment. Not because of the insult, not because of the embarrassment, but because I suddenly realized something important. Lily genuinely believed the story she was telling. She believed she had achieved this. She believed I had doubted her. She believed this house was proof she had been right all along. And if she believed that, then the truth was going to feel like gravity, unavoidable. I reached for my phone. Not dramatically, just calmly. Lily noticed the movement. What are you doing? She asked, smiling. Checking something, I replied. Danielle laughed. Don't tell me you're fact-checking Lily's speech. A few people chuckled. I looked up at my sister. Then I said something that made the entire kitchen fall silent. Well, I said calmly, if we're talking about mortgages, I actually know this one pretty well. Aaron nodded, curious. Oh yeah? I unlocked my phone, opened my email, scrolled for a moment. Then I turned the screen slightly toward Lily. Because this one, I said quietly, is in my name. For a second, Lily didn't react, like the sentence hadn't fully processed yet. Then her smile froze. Mark blinked. What? The room went completely still. No music, no laughter. Just 30 people suddenly realizing the story they had been listening to all night might not be true. And Lily was about to understand something she had forgotten. When your house exists because someone else signed the mortgage, you probably shouldn't insult that person in front of witnesses. For a moment after I said it, the entire kitchen went silent. Not the casual quiet of a conversation pausing. The kind of silence where people suddenly realize something important just happened, and no one is quite sure how to react. Lily was still staring at my phone. Her smile had completely disappeared. What do you mean? She asked. Her voice sounded tighter now. I kept my tone calm. I mean the mortgage, I said. It's under my name. Someone behind Danielle whispered, Wait. What? Mark stepped forward immediately. That's not funny. Emily, I'm not joking. I turned the phone slightly so Lily could see the screen more clearly. It was the loan confirmation email from the bank. At the top of the document was the borrower name, Emily Carter. Lily's face lost what little color it had left. You're exaggerating, she said quickly. No, I replied. I'm explaining. Aaron, the real estate guy, leaned closer. Hold on, he said. You're saying you're the borrower? Yes. His eyebrows went up. That means the bank approved the loan based on your credit. Correct. Danielle looked confused. But Lily said, I know what Lily said. I looked back at my sister. She just said it had good credit and discipline. Mark rubbed the back of his neck. Emily, he said quietly, this really isn't the time. That's interesting, I replied, because Lily seemed to think this was the perfect time to talk about it earlier. A few people shifted awkwardly. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Lily crossed her arms. You're twisting things, am I? She looked around at the guests. This is just a technical detail, she said quickly. Emily helped with paperwork. Aaron shook his head slowly. That's not a technical detail. Everyone turned to him. If the mortgage is in her name, he explained. She's the one legally responsible for the loan. The words hung in the air. Legally responsible. Danielle blinked. So, if something happens, the bank calls Emily, Aaron finished. Mark looked frustrated now. Okay. Yes. Emily helped us with the approval, he admitted. But we're the ones paying the mortgage. That was the agreement, I said. Lily turned toward me sharply. You're making it sound like we didn't earn this. I didn't raise my voice. I'm making it sound like the bank rejected your application twice. Someone gasped quietly. Mark closed his eyes for a moment. Clearly, he had hoped that part wouldn't come out. But Lily wasn't ready to stop fighting yet. That doesn't mean anything, she said defensively. Lots of people get help. Exactly, I replied. And then I looked around the room, at all the people who had been congratulating her all night. At least now everyone knows the full story. My mother stepped forward suddenly. Emily, she said sharply. I looked at her. You didn't need to embarrass your sister. That sentence almost made me laugh. Embarrass her? I gestured lightly around the kitchen. Mom, she literally told 30 people I was jealous of her. That was just teasing. No, I said calmly. That was a speech. Aaron cleared his throat. I'm sorry, he said to Lily and Mark. But I have to ask. They both looked at him. If Emily is the borrower, he paused. Is she also on the title? Now the silence came back again. Because that question mattered. A lot. Lily hesitated. Mark didn't answer. So I did. No, I said. Relief flickered across Lily's face. But only for a second. However, I continued, the loan agreement gives me financial authority over the mortgage. Aaron nodded immediately. Right. He looked at Lily. That means if payments stop, the lender goes after Emily, Danielle whispered. Oh my God. Mark spoke quickly. We're making the payments. So far, I said. Lily's eyes flashed. What is that supposed to mean? I picked up my wine glass again. Nothing dramatic, just calm. It means, I said, that when someone publicly mocks the person responsible for their mortgage, I took a small sip. It makes that person reconsider their level of generosity. The room went completely still again, because everyone understood what I had just implied. Mark stared at me. You wouldn't actually do anything. I tilted my head slightly. That depends. On what? Lily snapped. I met her eyes. On whether you keep pretending this house has nothing to do with me. No one spoke. Not my mother. Not Mark. Not Lily. Because for the first time all evening, the truth was finally sitting in the middle of the room, and everyone could see it. This wasn't just Lily's house. It was a mortgage with my name on it. And contracts have consequences. For several long seconds after I finished speaking, no one in the kitchen moved. The energy of the entire party had shifted. Earlier, people had been laughing, admiring the house, congratulating Lily and Mark like they had just achieved something impressive. Now they were looking at them differently. Not hostile, but curious. And curiosity can be far more uncomfortable than judgment. Danielle slowly lowered her drink. So, she said carefully, Emily is basically the reason the bank approved the house? Aaron answered before anyone else could. Yes. He wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. He was just stating the obvious. If the mortgage is in her name, her credit is what made the loan possible. Someone behind him whispered, Wow. Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at Lily, then back at me. Emily, he said quietly. Can we talk for a second? I knew what that meant. He wanted to move this conversation somewhere private. But Lily had started this conversation in front of 30 people, so I kept my voice steady. We are talking. My mother stepped forward again, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. That's enough, she said firmly. This is Lily's housewarming party. I looked at her calmly. Yes, the party where Lily told everyone I was jealous of her. Mom frowned. You're being dramatic. I almost smiled. Dramatic. That word had been used on me my entire life anytime I pointed out something uncomfortable. But this wasn't drama. This was paperwork. Aaron leaned against the counter again, clearly fascinated now. Out of curiosity, he asked me, what kind of loan structure did the bank use? Mark groaned softly. Aaron, man. But Aaron was genuinely interested. As the primary borrower, Does Emily have refinancing authority? Yes, I said. Lily's head snapped toward me. What does that mean? Erin answered before I could. It means she can refinance the loan if she wants. Lily looked confused. And if refinancing isn't possible, Erin said carefully, the property usually has to be sold to settle the loan. The word sold hit the room like a dropped glass. Danielle's eyes widened. Wait, seriously? Erin nodded. It's rare, he added quickly, but legally possible depending on the agreement. Now Lily was staring directly at me. You wouldn't do that. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I picked up my wine glass again and took another slow sip. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I wanted to choose my words carefully. Finally, I set the glass down. Lily, I said calmly, when we signed the mortgage, we had an understanding. Her voice sharpened. Yeah, that we would pay it. Yes, and we are. That's good. She crossed her arms. So what's the problem? I looked around the kitchen, at the guests who were pretending not to stare, at my mother, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Then I looked back at Lily. The problem, I said quietly, is that tonight you stood in front of everyone and pretended I had nothing to do with this house. That's not what I said. You told them I was jealous. That was a joke. A joke that somehow required you to rewrite reality. Mark stepped closer. Emily, come on. No, I said gently. You come on. He looked startled. I continued. For 3 months, I've been the person legally responsible for a 30-year loan. No one spoke. And tonight, I added, I listened to my sister tell people I didn't believe in her success. Lily shook her head. You're blowing this out of proportion. Maybe. I pulled my phone out again, not to show another document, just to hold it in my hand. But something interesting happens when contracts and disrespect collide. Lily stared at me. What does that mean? It means, I said, I'm reconsidering the arrangement. Mark's expression changed immediately. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious. My mother stepped closer. Emily, stop this. I looked at her calmly. I'm not stopping anything. I'm evaluating a financial liability. Erin quietly muttered. That's actually fair. Lily ignored him. What exactly are you saying? She demanded. I held her gaze. I'm saying you have 2 options. The room had gone completely silent again. Option 1, I said. You refinance the mortgage into your own names. Mark exhaled slowly. And option 2? I didn't raise my voice, but every word was clear. We sell the house. Someone in the room whispered. Oh my God. Lily's face turned pale. You're bluffing. I shook my head. No. Then I added one final sentence that made the entire party feel colder. I'm just making sure the person responsible for the mortgage is treated with the same respect as the person living in the house. No one spoke. Not Lily, not Mark, not even my mother. Because for the first time all evening, the power in the room had shifted, and Lily was finally realizing something she should have remembered before opening her mouth. The housewarming party wasn't just celebrating her home. It was celebrating a mortgage, one that belonged to me. The party ended about 30 minutes later. Not officially. No one made an announcement. But the mood had collapsed so completely that people began leaving one by one with awkward hugs and quiet goodbyes. Beautiful house, Danielle said to Lily on her way out, though her voice carried a new kind of uncertainty. Erin gave me a small nod as he passed. That was informative, he said. Within an hour, the house was nearly empty. My mother left without saying much to me, clearly upset that the evening hadn't gone the way she imagined. Mark disappeared upstairs at some point, and Lily stayed in the kitchen, pacing. I didn't stay long after that. There was nothing else to say that night. I grabbed my coat, walked to the door, and stepped out into the cool evening air. As I reached my car, Lily's voice called from behind me. Emily! I turned. She stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. You didn't have to do that tonight. I looked at her for a moment. You didn't have to humiliate me either. She didn't respond, so I got into my car and drove home. For the next week, I heard nothing. No texts, no calls, no angry messages from my mother, just silence. which honestly didn't surprise me, because once the adrenaline from that night wore off, reality would have started sinking in. Mortgages aren't arguments, they're contracts. And contracts don't care about family drama. Then, 8 days later, my phone rang. Lily. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Her voice sounded very different than it had at the party. Smaller. Emily, can we talk? We are talking, she hesitated. About the house. Of course. What about it? I asked calmly. There was a long pause. We spoke to the bank. I leaned back in my chair. And? They won't refinance. I had expected that. The same credit issues that had gotten them rejected 3 months earlier hadn't magically disappeared. And Mark? I asked. They ran his credit again? Another pause. They said no. I let the silence stretch for a moment. Finally, Lily spoke again. So, what happens now? The question hung in the air between us. Not emotional, not dramatic, just practical. Exactly the kind of question people eventually have to ask when contracts are involved. You already know the answer, I said. She did, but hearing it out loud still hurt. The house goes on the market? She asked quietly. Yes. Another long silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. I sighed softly. Lily, this was never about revenge. Then why? Because responsibility matters. She didn't argue with that. Maybe because, for the first time in her life, she was experiencing what responsibility actually felt like. 3 months later, the house sold. The market was still strong, so the sale covered the remaining mortgage balance and closing costs. No one made a profit, but no one was buried in debt either. Mark and Lily moved into a smaller apartment across town, and the subject of the housewarming party was never brought up again. Not by my mother. Not by Lily. Not by anyone who had been there. But sometimes, when I think about that night, one moment still stands out. My sister standing in her living room, holding a glass of champagne, telling everyone I was jealous of her success. What she didn't understand then was something she understands very clearly now. If the mortgage on your house exists because someone else signed the contract, you should probably think twice before insulting that person in front of a room full of witnesses.